the most physically deformed family in Alabama, afflicted by ailments resulting from their own intermarriage. Nestled deep within the Appalachian Mountains, concealed among the secluded valleys and thick woodlands of Winston County, Alabama, there once lived a family whose very name continues to send shivers through the local inhabitants. The Blackwoods were notorious not merely for their deliberate seclusion from society, but also for the terrible hereditary afflictions they passed down through the generations. This narrative recounts how the intermingling of familial bloodlines led to the emergence of one of the most genetically anomalous lineages ever recorded in American medical annals during the 1950s. The Blackwood situation came to light in April 1957 when a country physician named Dr. James Harrington was summoned to tend to an urgent situation on a distant property nestled in the hills. What he encountered would permanently transform his understanding of human deterioration's extremes. On that approximately 40-acre homestead resided roughly 32 individuals distributed among 3 modest wooden structures, all sharing the same family lineage. "What I witnessed that day will remain with me forever," recorded Dr. Harrington in his medical notes, subsequently made public following his death in 1983. Youngsters with underdeveloped limbs, grown individuals with disfigured facial characteristics, and a recurring pattern of cognitive impairments that appeared in nearly every younger family member. The Blackwood homestead sat approximately 14 miles from Winston County's nearest settlement, positioned so remotely that they seldom received visitors. Even postal carriers circumvented the area, depositing correspondence in a makeshift container along the main thoroughfare. The family patriarch Elijah Blackwood, then 67, had a reputation for his unfriendliness toward outsiders and the strict authority he maintained over his progeny. The Blackwoods sustained themselves through subsistence agriculture, cultivating corn, potatoes, and various vegetables on the rugged yet fertile terrain. They maintained pigs and poultry, seldom venturing into town for essential provisions. Their separation wasn't merely geographical, but extended to cultural and genetic realms as well, an estrangement that had commenced 3 generations earlier with the initial Blackwoods' arrival in that region around 1880. Dr. Harrington was summoned to assist Martha Blackwood, a 16-year-old experiencing obstructed labor. She was simultaneously granddaughter and niece to Elijah, resulting from a union between his daughter and his own brother. The infant arrived with severe abnormalities including polydactyly, additional fingers and toes, microcephaly, an abnormally diminutive cranium, and congenital cardiac defects that caused its demise merely 48 hours following delivery. This unfortunate occurrence was merely the beginning of uncovering an alarming pattern of familial intermarriage spanning at least 4 generations. The custom of unions between close kin had become an unshakable tradition among the Blackwoods, rationalized by Elijah as necessary for preserving the family's blood purity and safeguarding their territory from outsiders. The preliminary examination revealed that among the 32 family members, 27 exhibited some form of physical or mental irregularity. Among the most prevalent conditions were severe facial abnormalities including underdeveloped mandibles and palatal malformations, diminished height with adults rarely surpassing 5 feet 3 inches, intellectual impairments spanning from minor to profound, vision difficulties including partial or complete blindness in roughly 40% of members, congenital cardiac conditions, and limb abnormalities such as fused or extra digits. Dr. Harrington's records characterize William Blackwood, one of Elijah's sons then aged 42, as possessing an asymmetrical countenance with widely spaced eyes, a notably underdeveloped lower jaw, and an atypical spinal curvature that made him appear considerably shorter than his actual height. His spouse and also first cousin Sarah Blackwood displayed coarse facial features including an expanded and flattened nasal bridge, thick lips, and small deeply set eyes. Of this couple's 6 offspring, 4 exhibited profound intellectual disability, incapable of forming complete sentences even as adults. The most unsettling element, according to the physician's accounts, was how the household appeared to regard these conditions as ordinary. They don't perceive these abnormalities as problematic, but rather as a family trait, he recorded. When questioned about unions between close relatives, Elijah responded with unsettling casualness that it's always been this way and always will be. Verify if you've already subscribed to this channel. These somber accounts of secluded communities reveal truths about our humanity that few dare to face. You'll want to catch every upcoming case we present, documented with equivalent thoroughness and depth. The Blackwood narrative grows darker when examining their origins. Historical documentation suggests that the initial Blackwood to reach that territory was Isaiah Blackwood around 1880, fleeing from unsubstantiated accusations in Tennessee. Isaiah brought with him his wife, 2 adolescent daughters, and a young son, establishing himself in the remote mountains of Winston County, intentionally pursuing seclusion. A local census from 1890 already recorded significant family expansion with 11 members inhabiting the same property. What the records don't explicitly reveal, but subsequent investigations uncovered, is that this growth didn't result merely from new arrivals, but from children born from relationships among family members themselves. Correspondence discovered on the property dated 1910 shows rejected letters from distant relatives attempting connection, with handwritten responses from Isaiah. "We require nobody. We're self-reliant and pure. External society would only bring contamination to our bloodline." By the third generation, approximately in 1920, the initial evident indications of this practice's genetic consequences began surfacing. Local medical documentation, though sparse due to the family's reluctance to seek health care, shows births of children with increasingly severe abnormalities. Dr. Ernest Miller, a physician who occasionally responded to emergencies in the region during the 1930s, noted in his personal journal, "I was summoned to the Blackwood property following a difficult delivery. The infant displayed a condition I'd never encountered. Multiple limb and facial abnormalities and almost animalistic behavior from the mother who refused proper examination of the newborn. The child's father, whom I discovered was also the mother's cousin, exhibited similar signs of atypical facial development." The Great Depression of the 1930s further deepened the Blackwoods' isolation. While numerous rural Alabama families were compelled to relocate to urban centers seeking employment, the Blackwoods entrenched themselves further on their land, surviving through subsistence farming and hunting. This era also marked the commencement of Elijah's leadership, assuming family control following his father's death in 1932. Under Elijah's direction, consanguineous union practices not only persisted but were actively promoted. Local educational records indicate that the few Blackwood children who did attend county school during the 1940s were withdrawn after several months. A teacher from that period, Mrs. Dorothy Wilkins, recorded in school documents, "The Blackwood children demonstrate considerable learning and socialization difficulties. Additionally, they present distinctive physical traits making them targets of peer ridicule." Following Elijah Blackwood's complaints about his children's and nephews' treatment, the children stopped attending. The isolation wasn't merely a matter of personal preference, but also a reaction to mounting stigmatization. Regional inhabitants developed an almost superstitious dread of the Blackwoods, with exaggerated tales about their appearances and behaviors circulating throughout the county. Deformed mountain creatures or the hill's cursed people were expressions commonly employed when referencing the family. In 1945, a significant incident occurred when 2 young Blackwoods, Joseph and Daniel, cousins and also half-brothers, ventured to town for supplies. Their appearance created such disruption that frightened customers drove them from the local grocery. The county sheriff, Thomas Walsh, documented the event. The young men displayed no hostile behavior, just extremely unusual appearance, widely spaced eyes, protruding jaws, and a nearly incomprehensible communication style between them. I had to escort them back to the mountains to prevent further incidents. This occurrence only strengthened Elijah's resolve to maintain his family's complete separation from external society. During subsequent years between 1945 and 1957, the Blackwoods were seldom observed in town except for Elijah and his eldest son, Robert, who occasionally traveled for essential items like salt, ammunition, and tools. World War II, which prompted numerous young Alabama men to enlist or be conscripted, didn't directly affect the Blackwoods. No family member served in the armed forces, partly due to their physical and mental conditions and partly due to their absence from official records. Numerous births and deaths within the family were never formally registered, creating an invisible population existing at American society's margins. It was within this context of extreme isolation, social stigmatization, and established multi-generational consanguineous marriage practices that Dr. Harrington encountered the family in 1957 when summoned to assist with Martha Blackwood's complicated delivery. When Dr. James Harrington returned to town following his initial Blackwood encounter, he confronted an ethical and professional dilemma. As a physician, he immediately recognized the classic indicators of a population with elevated consanguinity rates. But he also understood he was facing an extreme case that could substantially advance medical understanding of these practices' genetic consequences. After discreetly consulting with University of Alabama colleagues, Harrington secured support from Dr. Walter Thompson, a geneticist who had studied similar, though less severe, cases in isolated European communities. In June 1957, 2 months after the initial incident, the two physicians returned to the Blackwood property, this time with carefully considered strategy. "We couldn't simply arrive and announce our research intentions," Thompson later wrote. "We approached by offering complimentary medical care and supplies, knowing the family had minimal healthcare access." Initially hostile, Elijah Blackwood eventually permitted examinations of some family members, particularly after recognizing his granddaughter Martha continued suffering from postpartum complications. This limited access enabled the physicians to initiate what would become one of the earliest documented investigations into extreme consanguinity effects within an isolated United States population. Over 3 subsequent visits, always under medical follow-up pretenses, the doctors gathered essential data: partial medical histories of 27 family members, anthropometric measurements of 19 individuals, photographic documentation from 12 reluctantly consenting members, and blood samples from 8 people for basic laboratory analyses. The era's technological limitations prevented today's sophisticated genetic testing. Yet even with basic methods, the results were alarming. Blood analyses revealed elevated homozygosity levels, identical genes inherited from both parents, a clear consanguinity indicator. "What we're observing in the Blackwoods," Dr. Thompson recorded in his 1957 notes, "represents a dramatic amplification of recessive traits that would typically remain dormant in populations with greater genetic diversity. Each generation intensified these traits, creating a cascade effect resulting in the severe physical and cognitive manifestations we've documented." Among the specific conditions identified were Apert syndrome, premature skull-bone fusion, present in at least 6 members, polydactyly, extra digits, in 11 individuals, intellectual disability in approximately 70% of the family ranging from mild to profound, achondroplasia, a dwarfism form, in 8 members, hemophilia in 3 family men, and retinitis pigmentosa, progressive retinal degeneration, in nearly 40% of individuals. The investigation also uncovered an alarming infant mortality rate. Approximately 60% of babies born into the family during the last 2 generations didn't survive beyond their first year. Those who survived often developed multiple debilitating conditions throughout childhood. One particularly striking documented case was Samuel Blackwood, 19, son of William and Sarah. This young man presented a rare condition combination: severe microcephaly, extremely underdeveloped jaw, multiple extra fingers on both hands, vision limited to light and shadow perception, and stature not exceeding 47 inches. Despite these physical limitations, Samuel demonstrated surprising musical abilities, capable of reproducing complex banjo melodies after single hearings. "Cases like Samuel's represent human genetics complexity," Thompson observed. "Even under extreme genetic constraint conditions, unique and unexpected characteristics can emerge, reminding us of gene expression's unpredictability." During one visit, Dr. Harrington managed deeper conversation with Abigail Blackwood, 52, Elijah's sister and one of the few family members with significant external contact during her youth. Abigail revealed that as a young woman, she had briefly worked as a domestic servant in Huntsville, returning to the family property only when her father fell ill. "They don't understand what they're doing to themselves," she confided to the physician. "I see our children being born weaker and stranger each generation." I attempted discussing new blood introduction with Elijah, but he claims external society will corrupt us. He doesn't realize we're deteriorating internally. Have you ever wondered what secrets isolated families conceal on their remote properties? Comment below. The mountains hold truths that society prefers to ignore. Your participation helps us continue delivering these impactful narratives that few dare to tell. In August 1957, the physicians presented preliminary findings at a modest Birmingham medical conference, maintaining family anonymity for ethical reasons, referring to them only as Family X from northern Alabama. The presentation generated considerable interest within the regional medical community, yet also raised ethical intervention questions. "We're confronting a population that voluntarily isolated itself and maintains practices clearly causing subsequent generations physical suffering," argued Dr. Thompson during the conference. As healthcare professionals, do we possess intervention obligations, or should we respect their cultural autonomy even when it results in severe genetic damage? Autumn 1957 marked a pivotal moment in Blackwood family history. Following the medical conference presentation, the case attracted discreet attention from Alabama state public health authorities. The state health department, concerned about the case's implications, dispatched a small multidisciplinary team to evaluate the situation, including a social worker, public health nurse, and legal representative. These authorities' arrival at the Blackwood property in October 1957 was met with open hostility. Elijah, brandishing a shotgun, initially refused property access. Dr. Harrington's intervention, having gained minimal family trust, proved necessary for mediation. "You possess no right to interfere with our lifestyle," Elijah shouted at the team, as later reported. "Our land, our rules. We've existed here 3 generations and nobody previously concerned themselves with us." The public health team documented precarious living conditions across the property's 3 dwellings, absence of running water or electricity, rudimentary sanitation contaminating the family's water well, and general hygiene conditions exacerbating existing health problems. 5 school-aged children received no formal education, and numerous family members presented treatable medical conditions neglected for years. The official report authored by social worker Margaret Collins described, "We encountered a family living in conditions reminiscent of a century past, both materially and socially. Children display evident chronic malnutrition signs, aggravating pre-existing congenital conditions. Numerous adults suffer from easily treatable ailments such as severe dental infections and chronic respiratory issues without medical intervention." This situation placed authorities before a complex dilemma. On one hand, clear child welfare and public health law violations existed. On the other, forced intervention could traumatize an already vulnerable, isolated community. After intensive deliberation, the health department opted for a gradual approach, beginning with immediate medical assistance and education offers before considering more drastic measures. However, unexpected events accelerated intervention. In November 1957, a powerful storm struck the region, causing a landslide that partially destroyed 1 property dwelling. 2 family members sustained serious injuries and were transported to the county hospital, marking many younger Blackwoods' first departure from family property. This incident provided authorities intervention opportunity. While the injured received treatment, social workers conversed with accompanying family members, including 3 teenagers demonstrating curiosity about the external world. Rachel Blackwood, 16, with less severe facial abnormalities than other family members but with mild intellectual disability, expressed her desire to properly learn reading. "I recognize my difference," she told the social worker. "But I want knowledge from books. Dad says we don't need that, yet I dream of understanding what's written on boxes we bring from town." This openness from some younger family members, combined with practical post-landslide assistance needs, created a breach in the isolation maintained for decades. In December 1957, an agreement was negotiated. The county would provide materials for damaged house reconstruction and ongoing medical assistance in exchange for permission for school-aged children to receive basic education from a teacher visiting the property thrice weekly. Elijah reluctantly accepted, primarily due to pressure from other adult family members who had glimpsed external contact benefits following the landslide incident. This small concession marked gradual transformations beginning. The designated teacher, Esther Jenkins, an experienced 58-year-old educator who had worked with isolated rural communities throughout her career, began visits in January 1958. Her personal diary, subsequently donated to the County Historical Archive, offers intimate glimpses of this process. "My inaugural day with the Blackwood children presented unprecedented challenge in my 30-year teaching career. 5 children aged 7 to 16, non-literate, all with some cognitive and physical disability degree. Yet what most impressed me was their knowledge hunger, an almost desperate hunger for information about a world denied them. Little Timothy, 9, with his extra fingers and asymmetrical face, spent nearly an hour fascinated with the globe I brought. Are we truly this small in the world? He asked, eyes wide with wonder. Throughout 1958, Teacher Jenkins' regular presence and occasional health professional visits began showing noticeable impact. 3 children achieved basic reading literacy. Chronic medical conditions received treatment, and gradually Elijah's initial hostility diminished, though he maintained external world distrust. A significant turning point occurred in September 1958 when Martha Blackwood, whose complicated delivery had initiated the entire discovery process, expressed her desire to leave the property seeking treatment for persistent health conditions. At 17, now literate thanks to Mrs. Jenkins' instruction, Martha had developed understanding that her life could differ. "I don't want others in our family to suffer as we have," Martha told Dr. Harrington during consultation. "If what you say about our problems stemming from relative marriages is true, then I must leave here." Martha's decision to depart the property, accompanied by 2 teenage cousins, triggered family crisis. Elijah initially threatened force to prevent departure, but local sheriff intervention and Dr. Harrington's mediation produced a tense agreement. The young women would be permitted departure provided they remained under social worker supervision and maintained regular family contact. This event marked the beginning of the gradual dissolution of the extreme isolation that had defined the Blackwoods for generations. In subsequent years between 1958 and 1965, more than half the younger family members chose property departure, many seeking medical treatment for their conditions at specialized institutions or integrating to whatever extent possible into broader society. The early 1960s witnessed profound changes in Blackwood family history. The property that had been an isolated enclave for nearly 80 years gradually opened to the external world. Elijah Blackwood, the inflexible patriarch, faced not only absolute authority loss, but a reality contradicting everything he had believed for decades. In January 1962, Elijah suffered a stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed and dependent on care, a situation ironically symbolic for a man who had so valued independence and isolation. Under Sister Abigail's care, with regular medical assistance now available, he survived 5 additional years, passing in 1967 at age 77. During these final years, Elijah witnessed transformations he certainly considered his way of life's destruction. William, his eldest son, assumed family leadership and, influenced by new ideas from health professionals and educators, began implementing significant property changes. The main house was renovated with social assistance funds, gaining basic plumbing and electricity in 1963. An improved access road was constructed the same year, allowing vehicles to reach the property even during heavy rain periods. Younger children began attending local school, albeit with special support for their specific needs. Dr. Walter Thompson, who had begun his family studies in 1957, continued following the Blackwood case for more than 2 decades. In 1972, he published a seminal article in the American Journal of Human Genetics entitled Multigenerational Effects of Consanguinity in Isolated Populations, a case study from rural Alabama. The article, maintaining family anonymity using the pseudonym Alpha Family, meticulously documented observed genetic effects across 5 generations. Thompson's work became a reference in population genetics, significantly contributing to scientific understanding of prolonged inbreeding effects in human populations. Among the most significant findings Thompson documented were progressively more severe expression of recessive genetic conditions with each generation, emergence of rare condition combinations rarely observed in populations with greater genetic diversity, dramatic fertility reduction and birth viability in recent generations, and occurrence of unexpected characteristics in some individuals, such as specific talents amid widespread disabilities. The study also documented health and development improvement in younger family members following 1957-58 intervention. Children receiving adequate nutrition, medical care, and education showed better cognitive and physical development compared to older siblings and cousins, demonstrating environmental factors' powerful impact even in significant genetic predisposition cases. A particularly notable aspect was following the young women who left the property in 1958. Martha Blackwood, whose difficult birth experience had initiated the entire process, eventually settled in Birmingham, where she received medical condition treatment and learned basic sewing skills. Though never able to live completely independently due to limitations, she found purpose working in a craft program for people with disabilities. In a 1975 local newspaper interview, Martha, then 34, reflected on her journey. "I was born in a place where we didn't know alternative living ways existed. We believed we were as we should be. Now I understand that much of our suffering could have been prevented. I don't blame parents or grandparents. They did what they believed right. But I'm happy our story can help others understand such isolation's risks. Other Blackwood children and young adults receiving educational and medical intervention had varied outcomes. Some with more severe disabilities were eventually placed in specialized institutions when family caregivers aged. Others achieved surprising social integration levels, particularly those exposed to education earlier. The Blackwood property gradually depopulated. Of the 32 members residing there when Dr. Harrington made his first 1957 visit, only 12 remained in 1975. The land, kept isolated so long, was partially sold to neighboring farmers, with a small central portion still occupied by family descendants. The Blackwood case had ramifications beyond the immediate family. During the 1970s, it influenced rural Alabama public health policies, with specific programs developed to identify and offer assistance to isolated communities. Health professionals received training to recognize consanguinity indicators and address the issue sensitively with affected communities. Across southern United States medical schools, the Blackwood case study, always presented with pseudonyms, became part of medical genetics curriculum, dramatically illustrating prolonged consanguinity risks. Dr. Thompson frequently commented that the Blackwood story represents both a genetics lesson and a humility lesson for medicine. A reminder that entire communities can exist at our health system's margins, facing suffering that proper intervention could mitigate. In 1980, a University of Alabama documentary team received permission from William Blackwood, then 65 and the last surviving Elijah child, to create a historical and educational record about the family. The documentary, titled Isolation in the Mountains, A Story of Rural Alabama, was produced sensitively, maintaining family anonymity and focusing on medical and social aspects rather than exploiting physical deformities sensationalism. The film, shown only in educational and medical contexts, included interviews with professionals who worked with the family and some consenting Blackwood members. One particularly eloquent participant was Rachel Blackwood, then 39, who had become an informal advocate for disability rights in her community. "People look at families like ours and see only the strange, the different," she said before cameras, her face with distinctive features but undeniable dignity. "They don't see the real people behind appearances. Each of us has a story, dreams, fears. What happened to our family is a tragedy that could have been prevented with knowledge and support. I hope others can learn from our experience." The Blackwood genetic legacy continued, albeit diluted, in subsequent generations. Younger members who left the property and eventually formed families did so with unrelated partners, resulting in rapid severe deformity incidence decline within just one generation. A follow-up study conducted by Dr. Thompson in 1985, shortly before his retirement, documented 43 direct Blackwood descendants living in various Alabama locations. Of these, approximately 30% presented mild to moderate genetic conditions, a dramatic reduction compared to the nearly 85% observed in the previous generation. The Blackwood case, Thompson wrote in his final conclusions, demonstrates both human genome fragility and resilience. Within just one genetic diversification generation, we observed significant health and development improvements in descendants. However, certain conditions persist, reminding us of consanguinity practices' lasting intergenerational impact. The original Blackwood property, reduced to less than 10 acres, remained occupied until 1992 when the last resident, Thomas Blackwood, Elijah's great-nephew, passed away at 62. The land was sold, and the original structures, deteriorated by time, were eventually demolished. Today, few physical signs remain of the site that housed one of the most documented family consanguinity stories in the United States. Visiting the location where the Blackwood property once stood today is a silent experience. The mountains and forests remain indifferent to the human drama that unfolded there for decades. A small plaque placed by local historians in 2005 marks the site with simple text, "On this site lived a family whose experiences significantly contributed to medical understanding of genetic isolation and human diversity's importance." The last known Blackwood descendants are now dispersed, many having adopted new surnames and integrated into communities where their family history remains unknown. Some maintained contact, united by kinship bonds and shared experiences few outsiders could fully comprehend. In 2007, on the 50th anniversary of the family's initial discovery by Dr. Harrington, the University of Alabama School of Medicine held a symposium on genetic isolation and public health, lessons learned and future challenges. Among the speakers was Michael Thompson, son of Dr. Walter Thompson and also a geneticist, who had inherited his father's research files. The Blackwood case isn't just medical history, he stated during the event. It's a study on how isolation, geographic, social, and genetic, can shape human destinies. It's also a story about how compassionate intervention can alter seemingly inevitable trajectories. 50 years later, we're still extracting valuable lessons from this remarkable family. Perhaps the most enduring Blackwood legacy is educational. Their experiences, documented with scientific and ethical care, continue teaching new health professional generations about consanguinity impacts, genetic diversity importance, and isolated community assistance challenges. The Blackwood story also confronts us with profound questions about cultural autonomy versus human welfare, isolation limits in modern society, and how multigenerational practices can lead to unintended devastating consequences. For those few knowing their complete history, the Blackwoods are remembered not only for the physical deformities making them medical study subjects, but for the human resilience they demonstrated facing extraordinary circumstances, and for the courage of those who, like Martha and Rachel, dared question established traditions and seek different paths. In a very real sense, Alabama's Most Deformed Family offers us not just a consanguinity dangers case study, but also a mirror examining our own attitudes toward those who are different, our prejudices and fears, and our collective capacity both to cause suffering and alleviate it through knowledge, understanding, and compassion. If you watched this far, you enjoyed this story. Comment, I watched it all, so I can get to know you and know who truly enjoys the channel's stories. Don't forget to like and support our work, and share this video with people also interested in these real stories revealing dark aspects of the human condition. Subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss any upcoming investigations into extraordinary cases like this one.